Let's go to Rory Stone up there in Tain in Scotland. You are a cheesemaker at Highland Fine Cheeses. Rory, I mentioned at the top of the show some breaking news that the head of Ofgem, the energy regulator, is going to tell Rishi Sunak, the Chancellor, that energy price cap, that cap on average household utility bills, could go up from where it currently is, just below £2,000 to just below £3,000, a huge increase. Now, of course, as a business, you don't enjoy any protection from an energy price cap. But if the head of Ofgem saying that, that does suggest that your bills are going to go up too. How important is your energy bill to the sustainability of your business? How do you fancy another 50% odd increase?
I don't really even want to think about it. I mean, it is punishing. We are looking for so many ways of reducing energy input. Manufacturing, cheese manufacturing, does require a lot of energy, whether it's refrigeration or heating milk. We do burn a lot of units. So it will have a very, very real effect. And that will, we've staved off from pushing prices up until now, the 1st of July. We've announced to everybody that there'll be a minimum 10% increase. And I think that I said earlier that some of the supermarkets have been resistant towards this because they feel that their claim is that they're taking inflation out of the game for the consumer. But they're now having to accept that products are just going to go up. And you can see in major retailers there's less on offer. There are some bare shelves. And I do think the major UK retailers are really struggling to identify how to compete with Aldi and Lidl, who are still doing a phenomenal job in the UK market.
From Ross County in Scotland to Enniskillen in Fermanagh in Northern Ireland. Glen Wheeler, you're running a restaurant in Enniskillen, very reputable restaurant as well. Energy arrangements are slightly different in Northern Ireland, but you are exposed to wholesale price increases too. If we've got the head of Ofgem saying that the energy price cap's going to go up from just under £2,000 to just under £3,000, that's going to affect your fuel bill. What could that do to your business?
It's so hard to know. I suppose one way what we have looked at is maybe reducing hours that we're open, maybe bring it from a 5-day week down to a 4-day week. We have to adapt. We have to come up with something. Our electric, the majority of my kitchen is electric. Lucky enough, it's all induction, it's not gas, but the price of fuel alone at the minute, with supplies coming in and everything, it's just gone through the roof.
Victoria, you and I spoke last week. India, a major grain exporter, banned exports because it's worried about its own food security. That's going to put wheat prices up. On the other hand, some other news out today is that the government borrowing figures here in the UK are slightly better than expected. So maybe the government could do more. Maybe Rishi Sunak could splash the cash to help the now quarter of families, according to the Cantor consultancy, who are, quote, struggling to make ends meet.
Yeah, well, that's the hope. We had public sector net borrowing figures for April that improved versus March, and it's partly a quirk of inflation because that means that prices are rising, so people are having to spend more.
VAT receipts go up, right?
So tax receipts go up, and the other reason why we saw that improvement is because if we look at what the government was spending this time last year versus now, clearly it hasn't got the furlough scheme, stamp duty holiday, all these fiscal stimulus programmes that were in place to support households through a really, really difficult time around this time last year. A lot of that pressure has been alleviated this year. So overall, the public finances are slightly improving. So arguably, that gives the government a little bit more fiscal room and wiggle room to try and carry out some of those expansional measures that might help with the cost of living crisis. But one of the difficult things is that with sort of expansional fiscalism or government spending, that itself can be inflationary.
It can.
So it's a very, very difficult conundrum, and the Bank of England, the government clearly wants to keep inflation under control. It doesn't want to exacerbate those problems and worsen that affordability crisis.
I did want to put that to you, Victoria. Ordinarily, if the government borrows and spends more, the markets usually think, oh, that's not very good, and sterling falls, and But in this situation, the market might feel the government should be doing something. The government's being too contractionary, too mean, if you like, with the public finances, too cautious. Is there a sense of that?
Well, I think it's a difficult one because clearly the government wants to help with the cost of living crisis, but at the same time, it doesn't want to make inflation even worse than it already is. So it's treading a very, very fine line there. Let's go back to you, Andrew Jowett at the British Egg Industry Council. What's your pitch to Boris Johnson, to Rishi Sunak? Clearly, you have oversight of a really important industry. Eggs are a hugely important source of protein, often for low and middle-income households, by the way. What do you need to make sure egg production stays where it needs to be, so you are actually helping to reduce inflation rather than adding to inflation?
I think there's really two things. I think we need to see prices in the shops reflecting the reality of the cost of production. Otherwise, we'll just see a decline in the amount of eggs. But then I strongly think that as a nation, we should be helping those who are less well off to afford the food that they need, whether that's done by additional amounts on universal credit or things like that. But clearly, it's wrong to let the poorest actually struggle the most.
What's your pitch, Rory? What do you need to keep Highland fine cheeses working, ticking over, growing, employing people, generating tax revenue, adding to the economy?
The growth is not an issue. I mean, we're up 25% year on year, and I'm a bit fearful about it, to be honest, because I just didn't expect it. But we've actually got the buyer from Aldi coming up on day after tomorrow to talk about more and more opportunities. So there's definitely buyers in multiple retailers are having to do the job as described on their office door. They're having to get out there to find choice to get more stuff onto the shelf because it's not being imported into the country. So it's a quite a sort of schizophrenic situation. I don't look to government to do anything. I think we're just going to have to, the price will go up, full stop. Food is going to cost more. But traditionally, we've paid far too little for our food, and we've become a hugely wasteful nation. My parents both fought through the Second War, and there was nothing thrown away from the fridge. It was all used. So I think we do need to help the people who suffer the most, who are on the lowest available income. But that should be about getting back to using ingredients and raw materials and not using that precious cash on ready-made meals and some of the most highly processed foods, which are just bad, full stop.
Glen Wheeler from Scotland, back to Fermanagh in Northern Ireland. Now, I know your restaurant. I've been privileged to eat there. It's a very prominent restaurant on the high street there in Enniskillen. I know you're very close to your local community. It's where you're from. We've just heard there an interesting sense of how consumers are changing. Are you feeling that too? Do you think people are changing their behaviour? Do you think people are really budgeting? Do you think people really fear in terms of this cost of living crisis? What's your perspective as somebody who's running a restaurant that really, it's there when people want to treat themselves, isn't it? It's a kind of, it's an experience to eat at your restaurant, not necessarily an everyday occurrence.
It's quite hard, and I don't mean to keep referring back to it, but we've just literally came out of a pandemic, so people did rush back out again. They wanted to go out for their nice meal, their nice glass of wine. But we are starting to see this slowly, like the prices are going up. We have kept our prices as tight as we can, hoping that, we don't want to, we're here to make a living, obviously, but we still want a busy restaurant. Weekends are still doing very good. Midweek is slightly quieter. But I totally agree with what Rory has just said. I think we need to educate people maybe on the likes of food, on maybe utilising the whole vegetable, not just, the prime end of it or whatever. But I think we need to maybe stop, pause and look at just where we're at with food. What's going in the bin every week? Why is it going in the bin? What can be done with that? And we want to cook for people, but we want to educate people as well on the food end of it, that we're not wasting.
Welcome to the GB News YouTube channel. You can watch us live 24 hours a day, catch up on your favourite shows and join in the conversation in the comments below.
Don't forget to subscribe and you'll never miss any of our exclusive content.